The moment she says, "I need a break," something inside you tightens. Your chest feels heavy, your mind starts racing, and without even realizing it, you begin preparing to fight for her, to explain, to fix things, to hold on before everything falls apart. But here's what most men never hear. The real damage doesn't happen when she asks for space. It happens in how you respond right after. Because there are two moments that decide everything. The first is how you handle the next 24 hours. The second is whether you understand the silent signals she sends afterward. Miss either one, and you don't just lose the connection, you lose your position completely. When a woman pulls away, she's not just stepping back from the relationship, she's watching who you become without her. So the only real question is, do you collapse? Or do you rise into the version of yourself she can no longer ignore?
This is Liza from Secrets Inside the Mind, and today I'm walking you through exactly what the psychology requires from you the moment she says she needs a break, and why most men get this so completely wrong that they make it impossible to recover. Engagement CTA, around 1 minute. If you've ever tried to fix things too fast when a woman pulled away and watched it make everything worse, comment below right now. Subscribe because this video reveals the complete psychological framework for handling this specific situation correctly from the very first moment. Section 1. The psychology of her pulling away. What's actually happening beneath the surface. Before we get into what you should do, you need to understand what's actually happening psychologically when a woman asks for a break. Because most men misread this moment entirely, and that misreading drives every mistake that follows. From a psychological perspective, when a woman says she needs space, her emotional system is communicating something specific. She needs distance to process what she's feeling without the pressure of your engagement influencing that process, whether that's frustration, confusion, uncertainty about the connection, or simply emotional overwhelm. What her psychological system requires in that moment is space without resistance. Here's what most men don't understand about this psychological state. She's already pulling away. Her direction of movement is away from intensity, away from pressure, away from the emotional weight of the connection as it currently exists. And here's the critical psychological principle that governs what happens next. When you move towards someone who is moving away from you, you don't bring them closer. You accelerate their movement away from you. This is not about logic or fairness. It's about how human psychological systems respond to emotional pressure in moments of uncertainty. Her system is seeking space. Every move you make toward her in that moment, every message, every call, every attempt to explain or fix or hold on, is experienced as increased pressure rather than increased connection. And increased pressure when the system is seeking space produces one outcome: further withdrawal. From a Stoic psychological perspective, Marcus Aurelius wrote that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our power and our freedom. The moment she says she needs a break is exactly that stimulus, and what you do in the space between that stimulus and your response determines everything that follows. Most men have no space between stimulus and response in this moment. The emotional weight of potential loss activates immediately, and they react with messages, with calls, with explanations, with promises. And every reaction confirms something she was likely already sensing. This man does not have the emotional control to give me the space I need without making it about his fear of losing me. Understanding this psychological reality, that her withdrawal is not a problem to be solved through pursuit, but a psychological state to be respected through space, is the foundation that makes every correct move possible. Section 2. The first 24 hours, the most psychologically critical window. The first 24 hours after she says she needs a break are the most psychologically critical window in the entire situation. Not because of what she says or does in those hours, because of what you're tempted to do, and what that temptation, if acted on, reveals about your psychological state. From a psychological standpoint, the first instinct almost every man experiences is to close the gap, to reach out, to send the message that sounds calm on the surface but carries urgency underneath. To explain his perspective, demonstrate his understanding, or promise to handle things differently. It feels justified, even loving. But here's what's actually being communicated at a psychological level beneath the reasonable surface of those messages. There's fear, there's urgency, there's a need for reassurance that is more about his psychological discomfort than about her emotional needs. And she feels that signal immediately, not necessarily in the words themselves, but in the energy beneath them. Because women are extraordinarily attuned to the emotional energy underlying communication. A message that sounds calm but comes from a place of anxious urgency communicates that anxiety despite its calm surface. Here's the specific psychological damage this creates. The moment you react emotionally, even calmly on the surface, you communicate that your psychological state is dependent on her engagement, that your stability requires her continued presence or at least reassurance of it. And once she sees that dependency, something shifts in how she perceives you. She stops feeling like she can lean into your presence. She feels like she has to pull back even more to protect herself from the weight of your emotional need. Here's what the psychology actually requires in this window. Pause. Not because you don't care, but because you understand something deeper. Silence in this moment is not emotional absence. It's the demonstration of emotional presence, the specific kind that has enough strength to sit with discomfort without immediately acting to relieve it. When you step back without resistance, when you don't react, when you give space without making the giving of space into a performance of sacrifice, you're sending a completely different psychological signal. You're communicating emotional control. You're communicating self-respect. You're communicating that your world doesn't collapse just because she stepped out of it momentarily. And here's the psychological reality of what that signal creates in her. She expected you to react. She was prepared for pursuit. She was braced for emotional pressure. And when none of it comes, when the silence is genuine rather than performed, she starts asking questions she wasn't asking before. Why isn't he reaching out? Is he as upset as I expected? Does this affect him less than I thought? That questioning is the first psychological crack in her certainty, and certainty is what she needed to feel in order to maintain the comfort of her withdrawal. Uncertainty pulls attention, and attention is where everything begins to shift. The practical instruction for this window is simple but psychologically demanding. Do nothing. No messages, no calls, no checking her social media for signs of what she's feeling, no indirect signals designed to stay visible without technically reaching out. You sit with the discomfort. You let the emotional storm pass without acting on it.
Because this is where the psychology separates men who understand what's actually happening from men who react from fear. If you've made the mistake of reaching out too fast in this kind of situation, comment below. Tell me what you did and what happened. Like this video if this is giving you genuine psychological clarity, and subscribe because the next section is where most men make their second and most damaging mistake. Here's where the psychology becomes genuinely counterintuitive, and where you separate yourself from every other man she's dealt with in this type of situation. When she says she needs a break, you don't resist it. You don't question it. You don't try to negotiate a different arrangement or minimize how serious it is. You agree. Calmly, cleanly, without hesitation. Something simple and grounded that gives her the space she asked for without making her fight for it.
And then you disappear. Not dramatically, not angrily. You simply stop being visible. Here's the psychological mechanism this activates. Women are accustomed to men reacting in this situation. They expect emotional pressure. They expect pursuit. They expect the noise of a man fighting to maintain access. When you give them silence after calm acceptance instead, it disrupts the entire expected pattern. And pattern disruption is one of the most psychologically powerful forces in attraction dynamics. She starts asking questions she didn't ask before. Why is he so calm about this? Why isn't he reaching out? Did I misread how invested he was? And then, crucially, is he already moving on? That last question stays with her, because now, instead of you chasing her, she's trying to figure you out. And that shift, from her being the one who is being pursued to her being the one trying to read a man she can no longer predict, is the psychological foundation from which attraction rebuilds itself. Here's the critical psychological principle behind why this works. Men chase clarity. Women chase mystery. When you become unpredictable, when you stop following the expected pattern of pursuit, you become psychologically interesting again. You become something she has to think about rather than something she can take for granted. But here's the most important psychological caveat. This only works if it's real. If you agree to give space but spend the next 2 weeks checking her social media obsessively, analyzing her every post, waiting for some signal that she's thinking about you, she will feel that energy, not necessarily through any specific behavior, but through the quality of any interaction you do have. Performed detachment while remaining emotionally fixated communicates itself, and it destroys the entire psychological effect. You can't fake genuine detachment, you have to build it. And the only way to build it is to genuinely redirect your energy, not toward monitoring her absence, but toward building something in it. From a psychological standpoint, agreeing and disappearing is not a tactic designed to manipulate her response. It's the behavioral expression of a man who understands that his value doesn't need to be argued or demonstrated through pursuit. It simply is. And that understanding, when it's genuine, creates the specific psychological gravity that makes her question her own certainty. Section 4. The upgrade window, what you do with the silence. Here's where most men completely waste the opportunity that her request for space actually creates. Because silence without growth is not psychological strength, it's just delay. And delay alone doesn't rebuild attraction. From a psychological standpoint, this period of space is not fundamentally about her clarity. She thinks it is. She believes she's using this time to process what she wants, to feel what life is like without you, to gain perspective on the connection. And that's fine. Let her believe that, because what she doesn't realize is that this window is actually about your transformation. Most men sit in the silence with their psychological attention still entirely centered on her. They replay past conversations. They check their phone repeatedly. They call it giving space, but it's actually emotional dependency wearing a different costume. And women can feel that even from a distance, in the quality of eventual communication, in the energy that's present when contact resumes. Here's the psychological reframe that changes everything. This is not a break from the relationship. This is your upgrade window, and you either use it or you lose her for good. Because when she comes back, if she comes back, she's not looking for the same man she stepped away from. She's looking for evidence that something genuinely changed. Her psychological system will assess whether you're the same or different within the first moments of re-engagement. And if you're the same, her decision is confirmed. There are 3 specific areas where genuine change creates the psychological shift that matters. The first is your physical presence. When a man develops genuine physical discipline, when his body reflects his standards, everything changes. His posture shifts, his energy changes. The confidence he carries stops being something he has to manufacture and starts being something that simply exists as the natural expression of consistent physical development. This is not about aesthetics. It's about the specific psychological effect that genuine physical discipline has on how a man carries himself in every interaction. The second is your mental depth. Attraction is not sustained by presence. It's sustained by evolution. A woman doesn't stay psychologically engaged with a man because he's available. She stays engaged because he's continuing to develop in ways that make him genuinely interesting. The familiarity that comes with making someone the center of your world kills curiosity. And curiosity is what psychological engagement requires to remain alive. Use this window to expand your thinking, your knowledge, your perspective, not to impress her, but because the version of you she got used to was a version that stopped growing in ways she could feel. The third is your direction. Nothing makes a man more psychologically interchangeable than standing still. When your life revolves around her, she becomes your center. And once she feels that, once she registers that your daily momentum depends on her engagement, she pulls away. not because she doesn't care, but because carrying another person's direction is psychologically exhausting. Rebuild your center. Focus on your work, your goals, your forward momentum. Create movement that exists independently of her. Because here's the psychological truth most men resist. If your life pauses because she stepped away, you never had the internal grounding that sustainable attraction requires. Section 5. The timing and approach, when and how to reach back out. When the silence has been real, when your energy has genuinely shifted, when the upgrade window has been used rather than wasted, the question of whether and how to reach back out becomes relevant. And timing here is not arbitrary. It reflects your psychological position. From a psychological standpoint, reaching out too soon signals that nothing has changed, that you were simply holding your breath, waiting for enough time to pass to justify contact. And she will feel that signal the moment the message arrives. But waiting too long allows the connection to go genuinely cold, for you to become irrelevant through absence rather than compelling through presence. The psychological window, where silence turns into genuine curiosity, where her certainty about her decision begins to generate genuine questions rather than comfortable confirmation, tends to peak around 2 weeks of genuine silence. Not because of a rule, but because that's the psychological time frame where absence moves from expected to notable. When you do reach out, the tone is everything, and it should carry none of the emotional weight most men bring to this moment. You're not trying to pull her back. You're not creating pressure for a response. You're not opening a negotiation about the connection. You're reminding her, through the lightness and groundedness of your communication, what it felt like to be around a man who isn't consumed by her engagement. Something simple, something connected to a shared experience without demanding anything in return. No direct questions that shift the frame to one where you're waiting for her answer. No emotional explanation of what you've been thinking. No attempt to create a reaction. You drop something calm and grounded and then step back again. The psychological message you're sending with this approach: my life has been full in your absence. I'm not reaching out from need. I'm opening a door because I choose to, not because I require what's on the other side. And then you watch how she responds, not with anxious analysis, but with calm observation, because her response tells you everything about where the dynamic actually stands. Section 6. Reading her signals, the 3 that actually matter. When she begins responding, when the silence shifts into some form of engagement, there are 3 specific psychological signals that determine whether the connection has genuine potential or whether she's already moved on. And most men miss them entirely because they're looking at the wrong things. From a psychological standpoint, a woman rarely says directly, "I want to reconnect." She doesn't need to. She shows it through specific behavioral patterns that are psychologically distinct from casual or obligation-driven communication. The first signal is intentional engagement. She reaches out with something personal in the communication: curiosity about your life, engagement with something specific you said, a warmth that's different from polite distance. She's not reaching out once out of obligation or boredom. There's genuine energy in the communication that tells you something important. You're still occupying psychological space in her world. The second signal is emotional recall. She references shared experiences, specific moments, inside references, things that only exist between the two of you. This isn't casual conversation filler. This is emotional memory being activated deliberately. When a woman goes back to shared experiences in this context, she's comparing what she has now versus what existed in those moments. And comparison is the psychological process of reassessment. The third signal is the most telling of all. She starts asking about your life with genuine specificity: your plans, your schedule, what you've been working on, where things are going. And most men read this as small talk. It's not. She's trying to place herself back into your world. She's measuring the distance between where she is and where you are. She's asking, without saying it directly, is there still space for me here? When these 3 signals are present, you move forward, slowly, calmly, without pressure or urgency. Suggest something simple, Not a big emotional conversation, not a formal attempt to define the relationship, but a genuine, low-pressure shared experience. Because if the connection is real, it will rebuild itself through presence.
It doesn't need to be negotiated back into existence. But if these signals are absent, if her responses are short, delayed, or carry the specific energy of obligation rather than genuine engagement, you need to accept something most men resist. She's already made her decision and maintained it, and holding on to the possibility of a different outcome only weakens your psychological position. If you're in this situation right now and trying to read which signals you're seeing, comment below. Tell me what's happening and which signals are present. Like this video if it's giving you the clarity you needed. And subscribe because the final section contains the most important psychological truth in this entire video. Whether she comes back or not.
Here's where I want to bring everything together with the most honest psychological truth I can offer, and it's the one that most men watching this video most need to hear. Whether she comes back or not is not the real outcome you should be pursuing. The real outcome is who you become in the process of handling this correctly. From a psychological standpoint, most men think the moment she asked for a break is the moment they started losing her. It's not. The real moment they lose her is when they lose control of themselves in response to that request. Because every move made from fear, from urgency, from emotional desperation, every message sent too quickly, every attempt to close a gap that needed to remain open confirms something her psychological system had already been sensing. This man's stability depends on my engagement, and once that's confirmed, the withdrawal becomes a conclusion rather than a pause. But here's the psychological reality of what handling this correctly actually creates. Regardless of her ultimate decision, you become a different man. The discipline of the first 24 hours builds genuine emotional control. The genuine use of the upgrade window builds real value. The calm approach to reaching back out builds psychological self-possession. The ability to read her signals accurately without emotional distortion builds perceptual clarity. All of these are qualities that make you fundamentally more attractive, not just to her, but to yourself and to every person you engage with going forward. And here's the specific psychological irony at the heart of all of this. The moment you genuinely stop needing a particular outcome, the moment your well-being is truly not contingent on whether she comes back, is precisely the moment you become the man whose presence she has to genuinely reckon with. Not because you've manufactured the right impression, not because you've followed a strategy that made her react in a particular way, but because your energy fundamentally changed. You're no longer grasping. You're no longer performing detachment while remaining internally fixated. You're genuinely grounded. And genuine groundedness, the specific energy of a man whose life is full and whose psychological stability is self-generated, is the rarest and most powerful signal in the entire landscape of attraction. Here's the final psychological truth. A man who knows his value doesn't wait to be chosen. He doesn't sit in uncertainty, hoping someone recognizes his worth. He recognizes it himself, and he moves forward. If she comes back, you meet her from that place of genuine strength, from the position of a man who has grown rather than waited. If she doesn't, you walk forward with your dignity intact and your psychological foundation stronger than it was before she asked for space. Either way, you end up somewhere better than where you started.
And that's the real outcome that should be driving your choices in this moment. Stop asking whether she'll come back. Start asking who you're becoming while she's gone. Because that question, and how honestly you answer it, determines everything. If this video gave you genuine psychological clarity about a situation you're currently in or have been in, comment below right now. Tell me what you did the last time a woman pulled away. Did you chase or did you step back? Be honest, that's where real change starts. Like this video if it shifted how you understand the psychology of this specific situation. Share it with a man who is about to make the mistake of reacting too fast. And subscribe to Secrets Inside the Mind because understanding the psychology of these critical moments, what they require, what they reveal, and what they make possible, is the kind of insight that changes how you show up in every relationship in your life.
Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.